Up until this point, we've looked at a few different examples of network configurations. We've seen examples of when all the hosts are in the same subnet and they use a switch or switch module to talk to each other. We've also seen examples of when there were multiple subnets involved and they had to talk through a router. So we have a pretty good idea of how devices work together to identify the destination of a message, but we haven't explained one of the critical pieces of that just yet, which is called the default gateway. The default gateway essentially helps direct traffic to other networks when no other route matches the destination IP address of a packet. Now, if you think back to the prior lesson, we talked about how routers have interfaces and how those interfaces require an IP address to be dedicated to them. The IP address that is assigned to the router's interface is very important because that serves as our default gateway. So let's go back to our example. When 192.168.1.2 tries to communicate with 192.168.1.3 or .1.4, it looks at its network mask and it quote unquote knows which IPs are on the same subnet, so it can communicate directly with them going through the switch. This is useful, for example, when you're sharing files on a local network, when your phone needs to connect to a smart TV, smart speaker, etc. But what if the destination is on a different subnet? That's when the default gateway comes into play, because let's say that a host 192.168.1.2 tries to communicate with host .2.2. Since .2.2 is on a different subnet, this time 1.2 doesn't know how to communicate with it. So it says, hey, I'll send this packet to my default gateway because it'll know what to do. The packet hits the interface at 192.168.1.1, which is the router's interface IP. And if you remember earlier in the course, we said that a router's function is knowing the different paths to different networks. So in this example, the router says, hey, this packet needs to go to 192.168.2.2, and I have an interface with the IP of 192.168.2.1, which is on that same subnet, so I'll go ahead and send the packet using that interface. Now, as a different example, if the destination IP address was different from the ones that the router knows, then the router also has a default route, which typically, at least for home routers, would be the open internet, which your internet service provider or ISP gives you access to, and so it would send the traffic there. So that, in a nutshell, is the role that default gateways play in a network, and that's why they're so important. So let's go ahead and complete this lesson, and we'll continue our quest to understand IP addresses and layer 3.